Khryses, welcome to the discussion about the Hinterstein campaign. I'm so happy to have you here.
I know, it's so good to be here, and I really appreciate you running the campaign. I think it's always useful. I mean, it's a recurring and driving thing to get players to see battles in an operational context, whether it's improvised for a standalone battle or, in this case, actually having that campaign. It certainly adds a lot more depth to the tactical decisions they have to make.
Yeah, thanks. And you yourself have a lot of experience in this area, and we were brainstorming about it beforehand. So your particular perspective is valuable, and I appreciate the comments. You had a really central role on this one, and I'll just kick off by saying, well executed, man. You really did a great job on this one, and we're going to highlight multiple points of decisions and commands that you made that were really key to anchoring this whole scenario. So this is a really good, important discussion, I think, because people can watch how the decisions were made.
And I will be forthright both about the decisions that I made that I think I made well and the decisions that I blundered into, which I'll still take credit for.
So I'm going to pull up map 1 now, and this is the start of the scenario. The yellow circle in the upper right-hand corner is your core. You're the 12th core for the red group, which we were calling Vulcanreich in this scenario.
Yep.
And you all were the invaders, if you will. You were moving into the land with the
liberators. We have historic claims.
Exactly right. My bad. You're the liberators, and you had a command of a corps. So talk about the initial plan as you understood it, and kind of how things looked from the perspective of your column.
Well, one of the driving... This time we approached the map and we approached the objectives from a logistical standpoint. We were looking at where the railroads are running, what we needed to do to continue maintaining logistical support for our advance down the line. And that, to our mind, pretty much meant we had to follow either the roads to the east or the roads to the west. Going across the massif in the center wasn't an option. And also pretty quickly we ended up eliminating the roads to the west because there wasn't the railroad support. We could get a small body across there, but it would have been expensive and probably ineffective to advance a large body across purely road support. That meant we had to go east. That meant Drosch was a consideration. We also discussed whether or not we could use the railroad from Kłost. But because we were told that we had logistical support down the railroads from the north of the map, and so that comes off in the northeast. Does that count? I said, no, just the northern map edge. Okay. So we knew that if we wanted to get free, close quotes, supply down the rail line, we had to get Drosch. We had to get that open. We could manage some short-term supply in the east if we could get the road network down to Kłost or Bran. But ultimately, Drosch had to fall. But all the ground, Drosch has got good defensive lines towards the north and the east with those rivers, so that meant we also had to come down to the east.
Right.
And that sort of layered attack, bringing forces in from Raful and Marne to box in Drosch and siege it and take it out early and efficiently and definitely not keep it under a prolonged siege. And while at the same time allowing us to advance our main body, or at least some of our main body, south to the Holtz Trieb line to at least menace Krum. The vision for the campaign was a series of turning movements, with the main body, after Drosch fell, the main body advancing and pressing the central line at Drosch, at Kelts, at Holtz, at Krum, while another wing was able to turn the flank, get across the river, and set it up so that the battles, when they happened, couldn't be purely done from behind the river line.
Right. And you took advantage of two lines of approach to Drosch, but you had a different mission.
Yes, we did. Because we didn't want to get held up by the siege.
Yeah, because you weren't going to go to Drosch.
No, we weren't. So we weren't going to be held up by the siege there. That's also why only one corps was coming in from west of Drosch. We had a force converging on Drosch from Raful and from Marne. And then we, as I say, the 5th Corps, the 12th Corps, possible other elements were going via the eastern road, via Kłost, down through Bran, to try and get across the river, I can't remember if it had a name, between Holtz and Zvec as soon as possible, and then basically prevent that river from being used against us. If we had time, I thought there was a pretty good chance, based on the cartography of the river, that there was a ford of some kind near Stutz. If we had time and we were able to pin the enemy south of Holtz, we were going to explore that and either find that ford or put a pontoon across there, turn the flank again to get to Stilts after Drosch fell and the whole army rejoined. But
Yep.
our main goal was to move as rapidly as possible behind the cavalry corps through Marne, Kłost, Brunn, and point south.
Right.
I think we weren't even going to Brunn. We were going to Kłost, and then we were going to go to Zvec, and then approach Tree from the northeast. But
so there was a little bit of confusion in the beginning.
Essential, and that's why we got approval from the army commander to, and this will come back to bite us, approval from the army commander to advance 5th Corps, 12th Corps, and only then the 3rd Corps coming in to cut off Drosch.
Right. So that there was that was the source of really it was an order of march problem to start with. Talk about how that. I think what you all could have done to not have stepped on each other up there a little bit.
I mean, basically, this is going to sound like I'm saying it wasn't our fault, but it wasn't. I guess the best thing we could have done would be to make sure everyone confirms their orders before we leave that room, and that they are going to specify their place in the order of march in their orders. As it was, 5th Corps specified, 12th Corps specified, 3rd Corps didn't, and somehow got on the road ahead of the other 2 corps. So that in turn meant that the cavalry corps, rapid-moving cavalry and rapid-moving infantry, were stuck behind the less rapid-moving infantry going in the other direction.
Right. Exactly. And so it was like, if as you described this very well articulated plan around forces were going to move on Drosch while you were going to move down to the southeast and prep that area for the follow-on forces to continue to move down into Holtz, etc. It would have been better just in the final minutes to get the order of march right, so that you really going first would have been the way to do it, right?
Because there wasn't really a conflict. There wasn't really a conflict. The 3rd Corps, to my knowledge, didn't issue orders to go ahead of us. They just didn't specify.
Right.
And by not specifying through random chance, they got there early. Maybe they were just geographically further south in the camp. I don't know. But yes, they got on the road before we did. And after a few blood-curdling messages to their commander to get out of the bloody way or I'll have you shot, they got out of the way and we got moving. Which
in the Vulcanreich army passed for courtesy.
Yes.
Totally. So you guys sorted that out. I would say it was a great example of specificity being part of this format. You have to really look all the way to the detail in order to not have delays.
I mean, General Winter is the winning commander in the Russian front in any era. General Murphy is the leading commander in Kriegspiel.
Absolutely. I want to pull up map 2, which just shows your progress down the road. So this is where you've actually gotten through Kłost, which is in the east. The yellow circle shows your column, and the 5th Corps is ahead of you, and they're cavalry heavy, and so that works out. So you all are marching down here by day 3 as the remainder of the forces converge on Drosch.
Yes, and to open up that flexibility from memory, they are moving from Brand to Trib. We are moving from Kłost down the down the eastern road to Zvec.
Exactly.
So we're not on the same road there. We're going to converge on Trib, but if there is a force defending at Trib, once again, we've got a fixing force facing across the river, and then another force turning the flank.
Yep, which take note, commanders who are listening, the way that the forces, once they got clear of that single road in the beginning, in this very start in the north, the way the forces split using those roads was the most efficient way to move southward. So that was well done. So let's go ahead and I'm going to pull up now map 3, which is the 21st
controversy approaches, yes,
and day 5. So here's where the supply situation had to be sorted out a bit, and you bivouacked basically at Trib in order to let the supplies catch up.
I had a misunderstanding.
Yeah,
I knew that the army commander wanted me to order a depot. I had failed to check if I was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I checked. I wasn't. So I had to ask the army commander to set up a depot so that we could continue. So we stopped for a day at Trib. The cavalry did not stop for a day and went on to Holtz and was then going to rest there. But I was taking the conservative view that given I hadn't heard that Drosch had fallen yet, it was more important to keep our army in as good a condition as possible than to get it a bit further south but divide the army further. We also hadn't heard any news of where I'm going to say Hinterstein, Blue, whatever I can't remember what they're called, where the Blue Army had gotten to.
Yeah, the
So,
Schwarzhafen army was had southern
Schwarzhaven,
gun.
thank
Yeah,
you. If we'd
that's
been
right.
aware they were this close, I may well have moved faster. As it
Hmm.
was, I waited until I could guarantee I could resupply and
Now,
rebuild my
I'm gonna
troops.
uh, I'm gonna absolutely call out that this was the right call to make, because it conserved your forces, and that came tremendously in handy later. So,
True.
um, by
And,
stopping and letting supply catch up, because you really weren't on a timeline, you had to let Drosh fall. You had to develop the situation.
yeah,
There was no benefit to just pushing on aggressively, but you absolutely ensured you had your supply, and that made sure that you were at full strength for the follow-on battle. So that it was actually, it seemed like a conservative, smaller move in the campaign, but I think this was one of the key decisions.
it also meant that we had the artillery weight to fight out that first day and use quite a lot
Exactly.
of artillery,
Right.
and then re-ammo and be able to have the same artillery weight the next day, which we wouldn't have done if we'd outdistanced our wagons.
You hit it exactly on the head, because the real penalty for running past your supply lines in these scenarios is the loss of artillery ammunition. So
Yep,
you're literally, your number of hours of artillery availability will drop if you try to just live off your wagon trains, your local
absolutely.
wagon trains. Okay, great.
Late on the 21st, I got word from, so this at this point, I got word from my army commander telling me to move as rapidly as I could to Holtz. So I
Yep.
ordered a force march from First Light from Trebe down to Holtz.
Yep, and that's we'll bring up the next map there, which is map 4, and then shows you in column ready to go. But this time, the when it was about the 23rd, which is 2 days slash turns later, you found out that actually the force that had gone down to Holtz had run into a pretty large blue force.
Now, I wanted to explore that question
Sure.
because I don't understand how a force march on the 22nd, well, force
Yep.
march order on the 22nd didn't get down to Holtz or didn't make any real time. Because as far as I can tell, and I know I confirmed with you on the evening of the 23rd, at that stage, how many hours were left of the march to Holtz, and was told about 6 hours. So a force march on the 22nd, and then a force march on the 24th between, say, first light, say 6 a.m. to 1000.
Yeah.
In my mind, that gets me a lot closer to Holtz than I actually was.
Um, I'm showing you on the 23rd. So the 22nd, the Battle of Holtz took place, and you were
Hmm.
still uh, getting your supplies sorted out. And so the 23rd, you were on the road, and actually, your forced march was the reason the battle happened so quickly.
Okay, because
In other
I
words,
had orders on the 22nd and the 23rd to force march, and I encountered their first retreating elements at 2 p.m. on the 23rd.
that might have been a simple mechanic of the game, moving from operational to tactical to line things up a little bit. So you may have seen a little time dilation there, which was
Okay.
there was no disadvantage created by that change of dates. What
All right.
happened was that they were coming up, and in fact, and if you listen to if you have an opportunity to listen to some of the discussions by the blue side, they had very little planning time because they pushed on beyond Holtz, and you came up rapidly. So that's what that force march got you.
Okay.
You could not have joined the battle. You were still in bivouac getting your supply situation sorted out when that cavalry ran into the enemy. So there was no way you were going to make it down there in time to bail him out, basically.
No problem. But
Um,
that sort of,
but I think that was more a date and time stamp issue in the game than the mechanics of you getting your forces together to move.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
most of 2 days, or a day, at least a day and a half force march, meaning, and I couldn't see Holtz, was why I was unsure where I actually was when we
Yeah,
got to.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. I got it, because you were thinking I should be further just based on
I think I
the
should be in Holtz. I should be at least past
the
time.
mathematical count of the
Yeah.
and that is a reasonable thing to think from your perspective, and because you were looking at dates and times. Got it. Okay.
And that's in turn why throughout the battle, I could see Trebe a bit, but I had no real idea of where I was in relation to the northern wing
Got
of
it.
the Red Army. And so
Yeah.
I wasn't aware they were just over the river. And I just thought, well, I don't know where we are, but wherever we are, it's not Holtz. And so what we have to do is try and hold the Blue Army here because they're not at the key location because they're here fighting us and we're not at the key location.
Right. Okay. Great. I'll bring up the next map that starts the beginning of map 5, the opening of Elm Box. So the yellow shape around your unit, which
Yeah.
was you were the primary force south of the river. You had imagined you'd be farther down the down toward Holtz, believing you'd had a day and a half of force marching, but in fact you were just coming out of Trebe when you encountered the first blue cavalry. So reasonable, and you couldn't see the friendly forces that were coming down from the
No.
south across the river because they were just out of sight. Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
My intention was if I could have gotten to the proximity of Holtz, like if I was in Tannhoff at that stage, then
Yep.
I would have looked at making a more aggressive push, try and cut off the blue forces north of the river. But
Yep.
without
Yep.
being in a position to do that operationally, I thought my primary duty was to fix the enemy and also maintain my force in being.
So what did they, so that's a great that segues into a nice point. So you really were following on from a perspective of going down and helping out at Holtz or figuring out what was going on with the Fifth Corps. You so you really didn't have a sense for the whole battle or the whole plan from
No,
your CSC. You were just fighting. That's so interesting. Okay.
my last orders were to get to Holtz as quickly as possible and help out Fifth Corps. Obviously, that wasn't an issue when Fifth Corps was streaming through my lines. But
Right.
the only place
Fascinating.
I knew that I wasn't was that I wasn't at Holtz because, and so I was somewhere between Holtz and Trebe. I had no clear idea where exactly that was, but wherever I was not the bridges behind the blue forces in Holtz. So I couldn't cut off their forces heading north. I didn't realize I was in a position to reunite with the red forces in the north. So I expected I was outnumbered, but just had to maintain defensive lines, ideally use the defensive advantage to keep them off Trebe, but hammer them in detail and use internal lines to keep my line together.
Now here's a fascinating Kriegspiel moment, in my opinion, where the absolute right answer, but for it wasn't right or wrong reasons, but for different reasons than you'd expect. So the idea was Swentz's, who was the CIC, his idea was use the northern force as a hammer, and you would be the anvil of sorts to hold or pin the forces south of the river while he did the main effort in the north. But you had no idea that plan.
Yeah.
But you developed a plan based on logic and going to Holtz and helping out what you thought was the Fifth Corps who were streaming back. And you said, okay, I'm going to do this. But you actually ended up doing exactly what needed to be done.
Well, which I think comes into what
Right.
one strong plus in what you're doing with the server, that it's establishing a recurring doctrine, which was what Kriegspiel was also doing in the Prussian army. That,
Right.
okay, in this sort of situation, with this understood technology, this is the sort of thing we would expect them to do.
Right.
And Spence has said separately, I can't remember the exact words, but that he knew that I would be in charge in that area because he'd already said I was. And
Yeah.
on that basis, I would do what I had to defend my ground and keep my elements alive. And so that in turn shaped what he could do, even though we were, by virtue of the terrain, well out of communication with each other, or at least out of good communication.
Absolutely. And so Swentz, the CIC, who was north of the river, never wrote a specific order, do X, because he knew you would do X anyway, and he could rely on that,
Yeah.
which is fascinating, which is great. It's really great to see. And it was your own clear-eyed assessment of the situation that led to that, because if you would try to be more tricky or you try to do a big flanking maneuver or try to you somehow blitz around the end and all this kind of stuff, it would have actually led to a disaster because Swentz would not have expected that. So um, uh, it's a credit to you both that you kind of aligned on expectations, even though you didn't write them out in a planning cycle. So that was great.
This really goes into a lot of my approach with Kriegspiel, where the periods are interesting, the forces are interesting, but I'm trying to understand the players who are consistent. And so what will
Right.
Paul do in this situation? What will Spence do in this situation? What will Marshall do in this situation? And it's not always, aha, that's the enemy, they'll fall into my plan. Sometimes it's my friend who is I'm out of contact with. What will he do in what I believe is his situation until we can actually hear from each other?
Yeah. And if somebody has the time and the wherewithal to go through all of these interviews, what you find is that the blue forces did not have that alignment and expectation. And the story there is one of confusion and actually unexpected action, which led to them being hampered. So your alignment of expectations and actions actually created a force multiplier, to use the phrase, for the red force, which is to me really an amazing part of an amazing example of what this format can do. So I want to bring up map 6, which is 1105. So the day had really not developed completely by midday. You were at this point still contending with cavalry, and the 12th Blue Corps hadn't come up yet. Soldier Steve was in command of that. What did you think you were facing at the point where you had cavalry in front of you and your skirmishers were out? And by the way, tactically, you were nearly perfect in the way you organized yourself on that side. Skirmishers out, pushing forward, but no, it was well done. So I loved it. What did you think you were facing with the cavalry in front of you?
I was confident that was acting as an advance guard for a main infantry body. It wasn't up yet, so
Right.
I would still have the luxury of pushing to get the ground I wanted. Once
Yep.
cavalry had been repulsed, it wasn't going to stand against infantry if pressed. But I also knew that with infantry coming up, I had to get my guns up so that I could repulse them when they came.
And you did do that. You actually had your infantry slow pace while your guns came up,
Yep.
which paid off for you big time. And we'll pull up map 7, and this is in the afternoon. And here's where your guns are up, and your guns are actually servicing the enemy entire line in front of you. So talk about your thought, your thinking here, because you had the 15th in the north pushing with the gun support, and the excuse me, the 16th in the south, Midas in command of that group. You had a unicorn poacher in the north, Midas in the south was holding back a little bit anyway. Talk
So
about that a
unicorn
little bit.
poacher in the north?
I believe so. No.
It is Hoffman who is S-Lock.
S-Lock. Apologies. Got it. Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, and Midas in the south, it looks like.
Yeah, S-Lock in the north and Midas in the south. And then
Neither of the commanders I'd worked with before, for the record. So it was,
Yeah.
I was learning how they understood different directions.
Yep. And did you know what the 5th Corps was up to in terms of moving over? They were moving around the south of the wood line there, and so you were aware of that.
Yep. They were responding more or less to my direction. I had
Okay, great.
15th Corps advancing lightly down the road to find the enemy and fix them. So we'll wait for get the artillery to come up, find the enemy, stop. Again, I've got no idea where I am in relation to the other half of the army. Fix them, get the guns up to hammer them, knock them back. And 16th Division advancing towards those trees just to see if we could get up a good defense in them, or at least deny them to the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 5th Corps in turn recovering, and what elements are around, moving around their flank to extend that further, basically to screen their southern flank.
Yeah. And quite by good fortune, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up map 8. And by great fortune, they had actually attempted to drive north, and so Midas, who you ordered forward, was able to attack into their flank, which caused them no end of harm. So on this map, the number 4 shows that action where Midas was able to catch them in the flank.
And also me rotating back north to, I'm not going to say yell, but politely insist on obedience to orders with 15th Division.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it was a misunderstanding rather than outright disobedience, but I spoke sternly to him in my official communications.
Right, because he was pushing forward and you didn't want him to do that?
Yeah, he misunderstood. My direction was to advance westward behind the guns, so acknowledging that we had spent a lot of our ammunition, but that the battle is actually in the mind of the enemy rather than on the battlefield. I wanted to... The enemy has been rebuked. They are regrouping. I want to put some pressure on them to fall back. Don't let them regroup right directly to my front. Put some pressure on them to fall back rather than be attacked. But at the same time, if they stand, stop advancing. Because we also don't want to hit them until we can get more ammunition up for our guns.
Got it. And then
they misunderstood the direction to advance cautiously behind the guns with, I will launch a full-bodied attack in front of my guns.
Yep.
And then asked, did I want him to keep attacking? And I said, no, you are not authorized to attack. Do not attack the enemy. And rode north to make sure they didn't.
You know, it's a great point to discuss for a second, and it's similar to the very first turn or the very first day, or the clarity of the orders. So, the there's no way that a body of soldiers can gently push, the famous orders from various periods of history to say very gently push into the enemy, right? There's no example of where you can do that, because the minute firing starts, the control is lost, right?
Yeah.
And so
Let me
skirmishers.
find the actual text, and then I'm interested in what I could have worded more clearly. This isn't
Well, not you, but I think it was actually. I don't want to misunderstand. It was the 15th Division's orders were to attack, right? And so the orders were clearly to attack. So when the umpire executes an order with your tokens and your units and your men, you want to be very clear about how you're approaching that in terms of formation, skirmishers, those types of things. Otherwise, you will be embroiled in an attack, right? So, so in other words, push forward to determine where the enemy line is, will end up in a firefight. So you want to be careful about using those kind of words. Was more my
understood. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Find.
Yeah.
That's the 16th. I'd move south to look at what 16th was up to. Here we go. So, message from the 15th says the Imperial enemy infantry has been driven off and retreated. They're approximately 4 kilometers to our west, now out of range of our guns. They appear to be mildly disorganized and attempting to regroup from their failed attack. 15th position is secure and waiting further orders. My response: General, advance behind your guns and take them under artillery fire, repeating with a steady advance for so long as they fall back, denying them a window to regroup. When they cease falling back, form a new defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was misunderstood.
Okay.
And then I got, Sir, as ordered, we have begun the assault. Stronger than anticipated, we have suffered casualties. Their batteries will soon be unable to support the attack, and I fear not having enough shells if the enemy counterattacks. Support from the 16th or permission to retire to previous positions. I say, General, you have no orders or indeed permission to attack. Advance behind your artillery if the enemy are disordered and force them back by way of presence. If the enemy set their heels, you are to form a new defense on good ground wherever that finds you. Under no circumstances are you authorized to attack the enemy line or close to rifle range.
Right. And given that your action was you moved yourself up there just to clarify and to make that work, and then you moved down to the south when you wanted to make sure that situation was under control in the woods. So an excellent use of command token. Each turn you would always specify where you were, and I think that's something that players out there take note. Make a checklist, tie a string around your finger, whatever you need to do. Always place yourself in the battlefield to the advantage of your command, right? So you did a good job.
I say also, one of the in the early ages of the RKS, one of the recurring, I'm going to say patterns, I'm not going to say mistakes.
Sure.
One of the recurring patterns we saw was that a corps commander with their corps reserve would tend to use that corps reserve as their own personal commander's shotgun, or like a little division of their own.
Right.
So that'd be, I'm in charge, and these are my troops, and I'll tell others what to do.
Right.
On the whole, I try hard not to do that. I will assign them to sub-commanders and recall them, but ultimately, each sub-commander is fighting their section of that front. So if I give them resources for that, they can use it for that, but I can't be everywhere. So if I'm going to be properly supporting them and properly running the corps, I can't also be the local division commander for this sector or that sector. So in this case, I largely gave the corps artillery to 15th Division, but I was also prepared to move it south to 16th as needed. And that also means that it frees me to, I don't have to see what my personal troops are doing. My personal troops are this commander here, that commander there, that commander there. I'm communicating with them by couriers, but if there might be a need for more communication than once every hour or so, I need to be sitting next to them so we can talk.
Right. So the point that we'll tease out on that's an excellent one, is that if as a higher level commander, if you create a reserve that's your personal guard, if you will, and you anchor your attention on that, you'll lose the nuance of what's happening with the other units, which are also under your command. So you want to actually have the whole picture in mind, so that you release the additional combat power at the right point. So that's
exactly,
and you did that here with the guns.
And as you said, release. That is a key word. It is important. If you're, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a reserve. In fact, it's usually good to have a reserve if you possibly can. But you need to assign it as. It's only a mistake to keep it under your command directly if it is actually committed. if you're releasing it to someone else to use, then that's good, and that they can then use it in their proper sphere. But at some point, you want to recall it or some other body to act as a reserve that is resting, recovering, and ready for action.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and bring up map 9, which is
just between map 8 and 9, map 8 being the evening before.
Yep.
My big worry the night before was that blue would have gotten away. I was worried that blue was going to withdraw and go down to wherever Holtz was in force and be able to concentrate somewhere else. So I didn't want to be sitting there in the morning going, aha, the enemy will attack me. I was going, I expect the enemy to have moved away. Let's find the enemy and then stop. We have to make sure we fix them.
Yeah. Well, they did not. They did not take that course of action, and they stayed there the next morning and tried to give it another go. Curious looking at map 9, and that was, even though it's the end of the scenario, that was generally your day. It was a full-fledged firefight across your whole front. What would you have done if the blue cavalry that we see there on the bottom of the screen had swung up behind you? Because that was the one question I had going into the next day, was like, is the blue cavalry going to cause some sort of disruption on your front? What would you have done?
We're not concerned. We brought our wagons in. They're within their line. If they come up behind us, we just turned our second line around. That's why we have tactical reserves rather than trying to extend the line the width of the map.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So,
all right.
I mean,
so you would have held.
I'd be worried. Cavalry behind me, we just shoot them, and then watch them run away.
Yeah, fair enough. And you actually had 3 squadrons yourself, which would have helped dampen some of that energy there anyway.
Yeah, but also I use the infantry to turn and repel them, and then get the fresh cavalry on the tired enemy cavalry.
There you go. Great.
Because even though we're outnumbered, 3 fresh regiments, squadrons, I can't remember, would have certainly been able to see off 5 weary ones.
Yeah, right. And S-Lock, there at the number 2 on this map, assisted in getting that pontoon put up, which allowed for a full corps to come down to the south, which decided the matter, and that pushed the blue back. So, well played and well fought. It was really, you had a chance. You did punishing damage to the enemy down there in the woods. So this is the image of your lads bravely fighting in the woods. But that woods defense, 5th Corps did an excellent job down there holding that line. They had an extra naval brigade. They had all that cavalry, but your folks used those woods intelligently. So Midas, Jacob, Ardius, and company down there at that end anchored that line in those woods. So that worked out for you, and you ended up being a very strong anchor that allowed this battle to come to the conclusion that it did. So well done, man. It was really, really nicely played.
Thank you. And I mean, despite my stern words earlier, I was very pleased with all my sub-commanders. I include 5th Corps in that. No, they all worked really well together, and with only Luso, make sure everything kept going in the same direction.
Yeah, it was a good group. S-Lock, Midas, Ardius, Jacob, all just top marks for everyone in this one. A couple of orders back and forth to be interpreted notwithstanding. So it was great. Well done. Very enjoyable. So I'll ask you to put your umpire hat on and just kind of shift into what you saw, kind of feedback, just additional things we can do to make this better for the future, so people can listen in, and maybe it would trigger some thinking on the whole groups. But any thoughts now that you've played it and thought about it?
I mean, personally, I know there've been some comments about orders every day being too hard. I thought that was excellent. I mean, it was a good way to maintain the pressure. It's the balance between wanting to maintain decisions under pressure against we are an international society with people all around the world who are not in the same time zone and can't do live actions all the time. There's actually a live action on at the moment in a game where I've explicitly said I can't do live actions reliably. I'm not in that kind of role. And so I've said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to this interview instead. And so yeah, it's a good pace to have rapid play-by-post. And that, I think, carried it, as long as the umpire's availability also allows you to do that. I enjoyed the colour pieces. The newspapers were interesting. I mean, I think any commander would always like to know more about what's going on. But that gave us some context without giving us specific information. So when Trebe had fallen, I saw that in the papers and I went, okay, yeah, that's fair. They would know that's fallen. when Drosch was invested. I didn't know whether it had fallen or not at the end of the battle, at the end of the campaign, sorry. But I knew it was invested at least, and so presumably that meant there were red forces coming down on the other side of the river.
That's so interesting. Until this conversation, I didn't realize that you literally had no idea what was happening north of that river, which makes it even more fascinating how that transpired in the south, because you just fought that from scratch, basically.
And with no idea where we were.
That's brilliant.
Until I saw the F from turn off at the end. It's like, oh, that's where we are.
That's brilliant. It worked out. It worked absolutely perfectly. Of course, Svec in his interview was claiming he organized the entire thing. So we'll have to go back now and have a stern word with Svec about taking advantage of good command. So no, it's great.
He has said something kind. Where did he say it? Oh, never mind. No, that's earlier on. No, that's not relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Well, look, I know you're in Australia. It was a very kind thing for you to come on as we're all fighting time zones a little bit. But I thought your specific command of the 12th, and then how you organized that southern portion of the Ombak battle, was something that your thinking was really important for other players to listen to, because it was an example of how to organize something when you literally have no orders. So, which is fantastic. And I really enjoy your play in the server, and hope we can keep you entertained with some more play in the future.
Looking forward to it.